The first time my husband told me, if you want stability, you have to make it happen, I didn't hear cruelty in it. I heard a challenge. He said it like he was handing me a tool. Hey friends, please like this video and leave a comment with your impressions. This will be a great help. Thank you. We never tire of reminding you, it's all thanks to you. At the time, that was how our entire marriage worked. We treated life like a project we could optimize, troubleshoot, and relaunch. If something wasn't working, we didn't fix it. We replaced it. New city, new plan, new season. I used to think that made us brave. I'm Hannah. I was 35 when I finally admitted out loud that I was tired. My husband, Evan, was 37 and brilliant in the way people are when they've been rewarded for moving fast. He could walk into a room, read the energy, and sell an idea like it was already a finished product. When he was excited, the air around him felt charged. When he was unhappy, the whole house held its breath. We had been married 10 years, and if you asked me where we lived, I'd have to pause like I was trying to remember a dream. By then, we had moved so many times that I stopped unpacking certain boxes. I kept our kitchen stuff in clear tubs. I learned what could live in a suitcase forever. I learned how to make a rental feel clean, not cozy. Clean was temporary. Cozy required trust. At first, I thought our lifestyle was romantic. We were building freedom. That was the phrase Evan loved. Freedom, independence, no bosses, no schedules, no being trapped in a life we didn't choose. The truth is, we were trapped. We just called the cage opportunity. Evan worked in software. When he was employed, he made real money, the kind that made the future feel predictable. But he hated working for other people. Not disliked, hated. He could tolerate it for a few months, sometimes half a year, and then something in him snapped. He'd start sleeping badly. He'd get quiet. He'd stare at his laptop like it had personally insulted him. Then he'd quit. Between jobs, he chased his own projects, buying small websites, trying to grow them, flipping them. Sometimes it went well, sometimes it didn't. He was always sure the next one would be the one that changed everything. I was a writer. I had some success self-publishing, enough to convince myself I was on a path. Some months were incredible. Other months were humiliating. That's the part people don't romanticize about working for yourself. The uncertainty doesn't care how hard you work. In the early years, Evan's salary was our safety net. When my income dipped, we leaned on him. When his projects dipped, he'd go back to a job and refill the tank. We treated it like a cycle we controlled. But cycles change when one person can't keep turning the wheel. The year everything cracked, Evan was burned out in a way I didn't recognize at first. It wasn't simple stress. It was like his body refused to cooperate with his mind. He'd wake up tired. He'd sit down to work and look physically pained. He stopped talking about new ideas. The man who could once plan our next move before breakfast couldn't even make a grocery list. At the same time, our savings started to shrink, not vanish, shrink. The number on the screen still looked safe if you didn't stare at it too long. But I stared. I stared because I knew the truth. Our lifestyle cost money even when we pretended it didn't. Rent deposits, moving trucks, new furniture because the old stuff didn't fit, fees, flights, car repairs from long drives, the cost of starting over again and again. I wanted to stop starting over. There were small things that built up like pressure in my chest. I wanted to hang pictures without thinking about patching holes later. I wanted a plant that wouldn't die in the back seat of a car. I wanted to know our neighbors. I wanted to recognize the same cashier at the grocery store. I wanted to have friends who weren't a rotating cast of names I'd lose the moment we crossed another state line. We were child-free by choice, and I didn't regret that, but it meant our community wouldn't happen by default. No school drop-offs, no other parents to meet. If I wanted roots, I had to grow them on purpose. And I didn't even have a shovel. One evening, after I'd done the dishes and wiped down the counters of yet another rental kitchen, I told Evan, I don't think I can do this again. He was on the couch, laptop open, staring at a spreadsheet like it was a personal enemy. He didn't look up. Do what again? He asked. Move, start over, live like we're always waiting for the next thing. That got his attention. He closed the laptop slowly, like he was setting down something fragile. We're not waiting, he said. We're building. I want to build one place, I said. I want a home. He leaned back, rubbed his face, and the exhaustion in him looked older than 37. If you want stability, he said, you have to make it happen. I remember blinking at him. Evan, I said, careful, I'm your wife. And I'm telling you the truth, he said. I can't go back to a job right now. I can't. I feel like I'm going to break. I believed him. That was the worst part. I didn't think he was lazy. I didn't think he was faking. I could see it in the way he moved, the way he avoided his phone like it was full of bad news. Burnout is real. It's not dramatic. It's just empty. So I did what I always did. I tried to carry the weight without dropping it. I started looking for work outside my writing. Before I became a writer, I had worked in food service. Long hours, sore feet, managers who treated you like you were replaceable. I had promised myself I was done with that world. But promises don't pay rent. I applied for a job with a steady paycheck, an office job, nothing glamorous but stable. The kind of job Evan would have scoffed at a few years earlier because it came with a schedule and a boss and a badge you had to wear. I told myself it would be temporary, just until Evan recovered, just until my writing picked back up, just until we found the next plan. Then I got the job. And something strange happened. I liked it. I didn't just tolerate it, I liked it. I liked being good at something that paid me the same amount every 2 weeks. I liked leaving the house in the morning and coming back with my brain tired in a normal way. I liked talking to coworkers about weekend plans. I liked learning people's names and not thinking, well, I won't know you in 6 months. For the first time in years, I felt my nervous system relax. And that's when the real problem began. Because when my body finally unclenched, I realized how tightly I'd been holding myself for a decade. The job paid most of our bills, not all, but almost. We covered the rest with savings. Evan kept working on his projects when he could. Some days he'd have energy and talk about new ideas again, like a spark returning. Other days he'd go quiet and disappear into his own head. Meanwhile, I was changing, not in a dramatic makeover way, in a slow, almost embarrassing way, like a person waking up and realizing they'd been asleep in their own life. I started making small decisions without asking permission from the plan. I bought a throw blanket because it made the living room feel warmer. I hung one picture, just one. I told myself I'd patch the hole later if we moved. Evan noticed the picture the moment he walked in. "Why would you do that?" he asked. I laughed because I thought he was joking. "I wanted to," I said. He stared at it like it was a red flag pinned to the wall. "That's how it starts," he said. "How what starts?" "Collecting stuff," he said, "getting comfortable, settling." I didn't have the energy to fight. "It's one frame," I said. "It's not about the frame," he said. "It's about you letting go." Letting go of what? Of living out of boxes, of chasing whatever new location looked cheapest, of making my life smaller so his ambitions could stretch out. I didn't say any of that. I just looked at him and realized something I hadn't wanted to know. We didn't want the same life. And I wasn't sure we ever did. Over the next few months, that truth showed up everywhere. I wanted to buy a small condo in the city, something modest, something with a mailbox that didn't change. Evan wanted to move out into the country, where we could breathe, or take what we had left and travel for a year to reset. I wanted to build friendships where we were. Evan said there was plenty of time for that later. I wanted to plan holidays. Evan wanted to ignore holidays because they were just expensive traditions. I wanted to talk about what we would do in 5 years. Evan wanted to talk about what we could do in 5 months. It felt like every time I reached for something stable, he pulled away like stability was a trap. And here's the part I had to be honest about. Evan wasn't always mean. He wasn't a cartoon villain. He could be sweet. He remembered how I took my coffee. He kissed my forehead when he walked past me. He'd send me random texts during the day that said, "Thinking about you." But sweetness doesn't fix incompatibility. It just makes you stay longer than you should. The longer I worked, the more confident I became. Not arrogant, just grounded. I proved to myself that I could support myself, that I wasn't dependent on Evan's big swings of income and inspiration. And once I proved that, I couldn't unknow it. At night, I started doing a mental exercise that frightened me with how calm it felt. What would my life look like if I were alone? Not as a threat, not as revenge, just as a possibility. I imagined a small apartment with my own key. I imagined putting books on shelves and knowing they'd stay there. I imagined a fish tank because I could. I imagined waking up on a Saturday and not having to negotiate whether we were about to uproot everything again. I imagined peace. Then I'd look at Evan and I'd feel guilty. Because he was bad, he was struggling, he was burned out, he was scared, and I loved him. But love doesn't magically turn two different futures into one. I suggested counseling. Evan didn't refuse exactly, he just delayed. After this project, he'd say, after I get some clarity, after we have more money. After. One night, we sat on the floor eating takeout because we still hadn't bought a proper dining table, another tiny example of our temporary living. I said quietly, I'm not happy. Evan looked stunned, like I'd accused him of a crime. What do you mean? He asked. I mean I don't feel like I have a life, I said. I feel like I'm always bracing. He put the container down and rubbed his hands, the way he did when he was trying to control his reaction. You knew who I was, he said. And there it was, not anger, not yelling, just a statement that felt like a locked door. You knew who I was. As if that meant I wasn't allowed to grow. As if 10 years of marriage meant I was required to stay the same person who said yes to everything. I didn't answer right away. I just watched him, and something in me went very still. Maybe I did know who he was. Maybe I just didn't know who I was allowed to be. The moment that finally pushed me over wasn't a big fight. It wasn't cheating. It wasn't screaming. It was a long weekend. Evan told me he needed to get away for a few days. He had a friend in another state. He wanted to clear his head, talk about ideas, maybe look at a potential business opportunity. I said okay. And I meant it. The morning he left, I stood in the doorway and watched him load his bag into the car. He kissed me, promised he'd call, and drove away. The house went quiet. And for the first time in 10 years, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like relief. That's when I knew. I spent that weekend doing normal things. I went to a coffee shop and stayed for an hour without rushing. I took a long shower. I cleaned the apartment without feeling resentful. I cooked something simple and ate at the counter, looking out the window, and my shoulders dropped lower and lower as the days passed. On the third day, I sat on the couch, looked around at our half-lived-in space, and thought very clearly. I don't want him to come back. Not because I hated him, because I liked myself too much without him. When Evan returned, he walked in cheerful, like he'd hit a reset button. See, he said, I just needed a break. I nodded, but I felt like I was watching him from far away. He started talking about a new idea, a new plan, a new maybe we could. And I listened, and my mind kept repeating one sentence. I can't do another decade of this. That night after he fell asleep, I opened my laptop and looked up therapists. Then I looked up apartments. Then I looked up divorce attorneys. I didn't do it dramatically. I didn't cry on the keyboard. I just researched, calmly, like the person Evan had trained me to be. If you want stability, make it happen. So I did. I started therapy first, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to understand why I had stayed so long, why I had convinced myself that wanting a home was selfish, why I felt guilty for wanting a steady life. The therapist asked me questions that made my throat tighten. Did you feel like your needs mattered? She asked. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to defend Evan, but my mouth opened and the truth came out before I could polish it. Sometimes, I said, but not when it interfered with his plans. When I finally told Evan I was leaving, I did it on a Tuesday night after dinner, not because Tuesdays are symbolic, because I couldn't keep pretending. I want to separate, I said. He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. What? He said. I'm not happy, I said, and I don't think we want the same life. He looked offended, like I'd broken a contract. You're doing this because you have a job now, he said. I'm doing this because I finally feel stable, I said. He laughed once, sharp. So you're choosing a schedule over me, he said. I didn't argue. I didn't list every move. I didn't explain the lonely years. I didn't bring up the picture frame, or the dining table we never bought, or the way he treated my desire for a home like weakness. I just said, I'm choosing me. The first few weeks were strangely calm. Evan acted like it was a phase, like I'd cool off, like I'd realize I was making a mistake and run back. He was polite, he even helped me pack. I found a small apartment not far from my work. I signed the lease with my own name on it, and the pen felt heavier than it should have. The day I moved, I carried my boxes up the stairs and set them down in a living room that belonged only to me. I sat on the floor, sweaty and exhausted, and I laughed out loud. It wasn't a happy laugh, it was disbelief. My whole body felt like it had been holding a breath for 10 years, and now it could finally exhale. For a while, Evan and I spoke like adults. We divided things, we talked about paperwork, we kept it civil. Then he realized I wasn't coming back. That's when his kindness cracked. He started calling only when he needed something. He'd ask about documents, accounts, logistics. It wasn't about me, it was about what I could do for him. When I stopped being useful, the calls stopped. And that hurt in a clean way. It didn't drag me back, it pushed me forward. The divorce wasn't dramatic, it was sad. It was paperwork, it was signatures, it was closing accounts and changing passwords and learning what silence sounds like when it's not punishment, but peace. I lived alone for the first time in my life. I bought a couch that fit my body. I put art on the walls. I got to know my neighbors. I stayed in that same apartment year after year until the idea of moving felt unnecessary, not exciting. My writing returned slowly, but it wasn't my only identity anymore. I grew in my career. I took classes. I made friends, not networking, real friends. People who texted me to ask if I wanted to grab coffee. People who remembered my birthday. People who showed up. At some point, I realized I had built exactly what I used to beg for. A life. Years passed, hard things happened because hard things always happen. Health scares, losses, deaths in extended family. A cancer scare that left me shaking in a sterile doctor's office. But I didn't go through those things alone. When I needed help, my community carried me. A coworker brought soup. A neighbor drove me to an appointment. A friend sat with me in silence without trying to fix me. And in that quiet support, I understood what I had been missing all along. Not a perfect plan. A place to belong. I also did a lot of therapy. Enough therapy to see patterns I hadn't wanted to see, the way I apologized for having needs, the way I called my own desires selfish, the way I confused love with endurance. I learned that stability isn't the enemy of freedom. Sometimes stability is the thing that finally allows you to breathe. I fell in love again later, not in a dramatic whirlwind way, in a steady way, the kind of love where a person doesn't treat your needs like an obstacle. The kind of love that feels calm, not like a test. If you ask me now what changed, I'd tell you the truth. I changed. I stopped trying to earn my place in my own life. And if I could talk to the version of me who stared at a savings account and felt guilty for wanting a home, I'd say this. You are capable of doing hard things. You are allowed to want peace. You don't have to keep running just because you've been running for a long time. If you want stability, make it happen. Just make sure you're building it for yourself, not for someone who only loves you when you're useful. So, what would you have done in my place? I'm curious what you think.